Hey guys! So there's 4 things I want to talk about in this video today. Number 1, I want to talk about the videos themselves. I meant to do that 2 weeks ago in the first video and I completely forgot while I was recording, so we'll do that now. Number 2, I want to talk about the syllabus change. Number 3, I'd like to talk about writing a paper in philosophy and how that's a little bit different from writing papers in other disciplines, and a little bit about what Chapter 3 in your textbooks had to say about writing a paper in philosophy. And the 4th and last thing I want to talk about in this video is the rest of your assignment for this week. So that's listening to the podcast and writing that sample introduction paragraph to a hypothetical paper on the assignment topic that is detailed on Blackboard. Okay, so first about these videos themselves. I found out about this website about a week before class started. So I am very new to this. This is my first semester being able to use videos in class. I'm excited about it. I also don't totally know what I'm doing all the time, and I didn't know when we started exactly how it would work out with this class. I didn't want to wait on on making these videos. I wanted you guys to be able to have access to them this semester as soon as I found out about it, because I think it'll really enhance your experience as students. But there are still some things that we might need to figure out, so if you have any issues with the videos, just let me know. One thing that came up 2 weeks ago was that from the student view on these things, every time you answer a question, PlayPosit prompts you to explain your answer. So I realized this right after publishing the first video. I went back in, I tried to edit it and make a question that made it clear that you do not have to explain your answer to every question, but I think there was still a lot of confusion on that. So just know that will happen. I can't take that off for some reason, and you don't ever need to do that. The only time you ever need to type something into PlayPosit, into those questions, is when the question itself asks for an open-ended answer that you have to type. Anytime that PlayPosit prompts you to explain your answer, you can just skip it. You never have to do that, so don't worry about it. Okay, and the last thing that I wanted to say about these videos, and it might seem a little tangential, but it is really important actually, is that I have 3 big dogs and 2 cats, and they are loud and kind of annoying sometimes and extremely intrusive. So I apologize in advance for any disruptions that they may cause. Hopefully they are small, and hopefully it is not frequent, but I just wanted to say that now before a huge dog just starts barking behind me and freaks you out. That might happen sometimes. Since I'm doing these videos kind of on the fly, I don't have a lot of time to re-record them over and over again anytime something like that happens. So it's just a little warning for you guys. Okay, that's it about the videos. The syllabus change is the second thing. You can see on the syllabus on Blackboard, I've already updated it, there's a bit of a schedule change. There's nothing that impacts you right away, so the reading and assignment for this week was the same. You still read Chapter 4 next week, and then you'll still have the Unit 1 exam in 2 weeks. After that, things get a little bit different. We're going to jump straight to Chapter 10 instead of going on to Chapter 5. We'll spend 2 weeks on Chapter 10 and then a week on Chapter 9, and your Unit 2 exam will just be over Chapters 9 and 10. So the reason we're doing that is because those chapters, I think, are foundational to this class. Chapter 10 is about just like what is an argument? How do you build a good argument? Which I think is really important to this class. But the reason they're currently, or they had been at the end of the semester, is because they're really difficult to get through on their own. Those chapters have material that is not really scary when it's explained really well, but it's kind of mathy, and I think that it's really difficult to teach it to yourself. So I always kept it at the end of the semester after students had already figured out how to get through this class, doing a lot of the work independently. But now that we have the videos, I can walk you guys through those chapters and through that material step by step, which means that I can put them at the front of the class, which will ultimately help you get through the rest of the class. So we're going to get those foundational concepts in early. I'm going to walk you through it. It is going to be painless. I think it's going to be fun. I like those chapters a lot. And yeah, that's the big change. So after Unit 2, that test will be, again, over Chapters 9 and 10. Then for Unit 3, we'll start with Chapter 8, and then we go to Chapters 5, 6, and 7, and you'll have, at that point, at the end of Unit 3, you'll have that option to do either the exam or the creative project. So don't be freaked out by this big change. It looks big. It's not that big. I didn't add anything, and I didn't omit anything. We just kind of shifted around the schedule a little bit. And again, the syllabus is posted on Blackboard, so go ahead and look at that. If you have any questions, if you're still confused, let me know. Okay, so the third thing I want to talk about is writing a philosophy paper and how that's a little bit different than writing papers in other classes. So there's 3 points that I wanted to make here. The first is small, but I think it's important. You've probably heard in other classes in high school, even junior high and elementary school, maybe even other college classes, that when you're writing a paper, you should never use the first person. You should always write in third person from an objective perspective. In philosophy, that's not the case. Most of the times you can and actually really should write in the first person in a philosophy paper. So you should say things like, in this paper, I am going to argue that, and then whatever you're going to argue. So don't be afraid to use the first person, and it actually might be really helpful to do that in this paragraph. You don't have to. If you don't want to write in the first person, that's fine, but I just want you to know that that option's there, and if you go on to take philosophy classes in the future, that's something that is going to be okay. The second thing, and this is really important, is that a philosophy paper, in philosophy, there's a particular convention for how you organize the papers. So you'll have your introduction and your conclusion, but the body of the paper will have to be organized in a really particular way. And you want 4 specific things in that paper. So after the introduction, you'll go into the statement of the issue. Then you'll state your position on that issue. Third, you're going to give the arguments in defense of your position. And fourth, you're going to provide a possible objection to your argument and what you would say to show that your argument can withstand that objection. So again, in a philosophy paper, you state the issue, state your position on the issue. Then you'll say what your arguments in support of your position on that issue are. And you'll wrap it up by saying something, some objection that someone could give to your argument and why your argument withstands that. So you'll give the objection and your rebuttal to it. So that's for every philosophy paper. The third thing about writing a paper in philosophy is that not only is the body of the paper supposed to be organized in that particular way, but the introduction should also be organized in that way. So your introduction should be like a roadmap for your whole paper. It should have just like a little statement for each one of those 4 sections within your paper. So your introduction should also say a little bit about what the issue is, what your position is on the issue, the kinds of arguments that you're going to make in defense of that position, and a little bit about what the objection is that you're going to suggest could be made against your argument, and again, just a little bit about why your argument can withstand that objection. So your introduction should be like a little mini paper, like a paragraph-sized version of your entire paper. There should be no surprises in a philosophy paper. After you read the introduction, you should know absolutely everything that's coming next in this paper, and you should know where to find it. So that's what's particular about a philosophy paper. You can use the first person. There's a specific organization to it, and the introduction should be a roadmap. It should say everything that you're going to do in that paper. And that's what I'm going to ask you guys to do for this assignment. You'll be writing what was basically an introduction to a hypothetical paper over the topic. There, my dogs. Go lay down, go lay down. So the fourth and last thing that I want to talk about in this video is the assignment itself. So you're going to be listening to a podcast. The link is on Blackboard. It's called Fu Manchu. It's on the podcast Radio Lab. It's really cool. It's really interesting. Students really like it in the past, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. So you're going to read the podcast. Can you go lay down? So you're going to listen to the podcast, and then you will be thinking about how you would answer the question in the prompt in the assignment, which is Fu Manchu engaging in deception? So the podcast is about an orangutan named Fu Manchu who gets himself into kind of a situation, and you're going to be thinking about whether or not he's engaging in deception. You're going to think about what the issue is, just whether or not he's engaging in deception. You're going to think about what your position on that issue would be, what kind of arguments you would hypothetically use to support your position, and what a potential objection could be, and how you would hypothetically respond to that objection. So you're going to think about all those things, and then you're going to put it into that introduction, that little mini paper, that philosophical essay introductory paragraph. That's the assignment. So a little bit just about the topic. So you might hear something like orangutan, and we're listening to a podcast. You might not know what this has to do with philosophy, but the question that you're responding to is actually deeply philosophical at its core. So it asks, is Fu Manchu engaging in deception? One thing that you want to remember is what we talked about in the first video, is what you read about last week, which was that humans as rational beings have this ability to have thoughts about thoughts. Remember, that's what critical thinking is, right? It's just simply put, it's thinking about thinking. So we know that humans have this ability to have thoughts about thoughts. For example, I could go upstairs and go through my socks and see that my dog has been chewing on my socks. Which is funny, my dogs don't actually even chew on socks. I don't know why I keep going to this example, but let's go with it. So I go upstairs and I find my socks have been chewed on, and I get really, really frustrated. And I think, my dog is the worst dog I've ever met. She won't stop chewing on my socks. Okay, that's my first thought. And the content of that thought is, this is the worst dog I've ever met. But then let's say that I kind of pump the brakes and I reflect on that a little bit, and I think, okay, you know what? I'm really stressed right now. I'm getting frustrated easily. I keep being stressed about this project I'm working on at work, and I'm taking that out on my dog by thinking things like, this is the worst dog I've ever met. So you had the first thought, which is, this is the worst dog that I've ever met, and that's the content of that thought. But your second thought, when you push the brakes and you start to reflect on that, the content of your second thought is actually your first thought, and thoughts that you're having about that first thought. So that's what we're talking about, is the fact that humans have this ability to have thoughts where the content of that thought is actually another thought. And that's something that's pretty unique. But one thing that we don't know is how unique is that ability to have thoughts about thoughts. So we have this question about whether or not other animals can also have thoughts about thoughts. Whether they can have thoughts about their own thoughts or other people's thoughts. And as you might be able to guess, deception requires being able to have thoughts about thoughts. So in order to deceive someone, you have to be able to think about what they might be thinking, because you have a particular thought that you want them to have. When you're deceiving someone, you specifically want them to have a thought that's false, right? You want them to believe something that's not true. But in order to even start to try to deceive someone, it's necessary that you even have the ability to think about what someone else is thinking. So that's a very philosophical topic. It's a question that we have in philosophy of mind, where we're really concerned with questions about what it means to have not just a brain, but a mind. And I think it's a really interesting topic. I hope that you guys find it interesting. I'm interested to see what you think about it, and I can't wait to read your paragraphs. So my last thing that I want to say is, please do listen to the podcast before you write the paragraph. Every semester, without fail, some student will just write a paragraph without listening to it. I can tell it's painfully obvious. It's usually way off mark. It's like almost embarrassing. And it's a little annoying, so it wastes my time having to grade it. So please just listen to the podcast. It's like 10 minutes and it's really cool. Write the introduction paragraph. Have fun. I know it's homework. It'll still be great. And as always, let me know if you have any questions.